All right. Now, the last task that we are left with for directed writing is speech. The speech, right, is a bit different from the remaining tasks because an article, uh, I mean, an article is obviously something that people read, right? So the style of writing is something that would be for writing itself. It's been letter, email, report, right, in the formal and formal difference, right, or semi-formal, formal. The speech is different because even though it's a written task, the kind of feel that you want it to develop is as if you're talking, right? It's a speech, and speeches are given verbally, right? They are not. I mean, they are written down for preparation. They might be printed in a book, some famous speeches or whatever, but the speech itself at the time is given verbally. And when you're giving it verbally, it's you're talking to an audience. You're not conveying your ideas on paper. You're actually talking to them. And so when you're talking to them and you're trying to make a point, there are certain techniques or approaches that you want to keep in mind. Right? So first is language. Formal, informal, semi-formal again depends on what kind of task it is. There's something called rhetorical questions, so that must be mentioned over here, right? So using rhetorical questions, using rhetorical language, and rhetorical questions meaning asking the kind of question for which you're not really expecting an answer, and no one's going to give you an answer for that. But it's the kind of question that will get people thinking, or you present something in the form of a question that will get the audience to possibly side with your point of view. Using emotive language, right? So whatever the topic is, trying to play with people's emotions, trying to get them emotional about the topic and about the side of the topic that you want them to agree with, right? For or against whatever it is. Uh, then the choice of words and the sentence structure is something that the kind of words that you would use when you're actually talking to someone, right? So the approach is actually different. Right? So maybe you want to pause. Sometimes you want to deliberately use shorter sentences for effect, rather than having long, compound, complex, and not all the time, right? But for effect. Um, right. So a speech is different from the remaining, right? And so you want to write it in a way that seems as if you're speaking, okay, as if you're actually talking to the person who's reading. Now here again is an example, and for this one, I would say read it for the style. Okay. So you can add an example over there, anecdote, so a real life example, maybe a story that will, help drive your point home. The evaluation that you do perhaps. And remember, in data writing, it does say that you can add ideas of your own. So it is a bit open-ended. You don't have to necessarily stick with the points. You have to, work with the points as I've explained, but you can go beyond and you can include points that are not given in the text. So you can come up with your own as well, as long as they're relevant, as long as I would say that you feel that they're valid, right? Hopefully they are valid. So make sure you know what you're doing, not writing random stuff, thinking that they're going to work, right? Being careful about what you're doing, but you can add your own material to write it right. And so read through this again. I'll share these documents with you. I'm not going through each one of them in detail right now. So again, for the approach, there is no need for a heading over here. Or you can say there's a greeting, good morning everyone, right? Greetings, dear listeners. Yeah. Good morning everyone is again depending whatever topic was given over here. That's probably in a school, so very casual, very relaxed kind of greeting over here. And then out of this, so this one apparently was about some study that they participated in. So they give a speech about their experience about it. Okay, and all the good and the bad according to Cambridge. Now, one thing that's lacking in these documents in particular is they haven't. So don't again. The reason I'm asking to read this one is for the style, not the content itself, not for the structure or the vocabulary or the grammar. Is because these are not high-end, exemplary material. It could be mid-example material as well, right? So maybe it didn't score very well in the exam. So one thing Cambridge hasn't done over here is given what they scored. Um, Ideally, they should have given something that scored very well, which would serve as a good example, but that's not the case, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we are done with narrative writing. If you have any questions about that, put them in the chat and wait a minute and then move on to composition. All right, so okay, we do have okay predictions about what kind of questions going to show up. You come across teachers, workshops. It's workshop season, so you'll have teachers holding these mega workshops and Tehri Auditorium and Arena and I don't know National Stadium and Kawada Airport or whatever. Right? Predictions are useless. Okay, prepare for them all. Simple. Right? You can get any of these tasks and you won't have a choice. There have been times when session after session or year after year the same task has been repeated. Right? So there is no trend as such. Right? They have they only give speeches in May, June, and they only give it after every 3 years or something. Or last time in October they gave a speech, and so and so they gave something else, and so this year it might be. There's no point, okay, because it's like hit or miss. Right? If it's a hit, that's good. If it's a miss, it's going to hurt. Right? And we don't want that. So again, there's no point in this prediction, right? I don't go with this. Right? If you're my student, I'll tell you to prepare for all the tasks. Okay. All right, composition, any one, you've got two descriptive options, two narrative options, right? 10 marks for content, 15 for style and accuracy. Right, 8 to 450 words. Now, let me just pull up the marking scheme for this one, right? Because it's something I want to show. So it's paper 21. Right now for the count, this is the marking scheme, right? So 10 marks for content, 15 marks for your language. Okay, so what are they looking for in content? Now let's just look at the highest band, right? That will tell us what will get you those highest marks. So consistently effective, this is for content, right? It's consistently effective response to the task a wide range of descriptive or narrative features used to create a consistently effective response. Structure is clear, well balanced, and carefully organized to deliver effect. So basically, structure, organization, it's well balanced, right? And features of narrative and descriptive, right? So over here, right, if you're writing descriptions, this is what they're looking for, right? And the marking scheme, I'm sure, is available to you. This right. So this is November 2024, paper 21. So look at the marking scheme. It's in there. And, right. So focusing on what's given, and right. Maybe you are looking at something. Your perspective. You're giving details because descriptions are giving details, and using the five senses. And so maybe, as you're saying, you're looking at something up close and then from a distance, and maybe something very detailed, right? So how much detail you want to go into the atmosphere. So if they're giving you like a situation that to describe, or maybe a location to describe, or event or interaction, right? So what's the atmosphere creating, the direction, right? So just like close up and distance, right? Maybe it's like from ground level, from a height, senses, right? So sight, touch, hearing, smell. Now they're saying deeper candors do it mechanically, right? So I can see this, I can see that, I can hear this, I can hear that. So that's the mechanical thing we're talking about, right? So how can you integrate it more, you know, what like in better flow, right? You can say the warm, holding, morning, first sunrise. Now you've mentioned touch, you mentioned color, you mentioned time. You haven't said that you're seeing that or feeling that, right? So this is the kind of writing perhaps Cambridge is expecting, and this will definitely get you good marks. I can feel the warmth on my skin. I can see the golden sun rays. That's not what they are. But that's the mechanical part that we're talking about. Contrast, right? So if they've mentioned, right, for example, there was a question, talk about a shopping area or maybe like a busy market before and after heavy rainfall. And so that is one contrast that they've given, but maybe you could introduce some of your own contrasts over there, right? So maybe in a shopping market, right, afternoon and evening time has passed, or maybe contrast is immediately after the rain, and then maybe an hour after the rain. So there's contrast over there as well. Setting and people within the setting. So where is this taking place? Like I said, just like it's a marketplace. So the kind of people over there, right? Maybe there are some people who are, you know, look like they're like very rich and they have, lots of shopping bags. Some people who are just window shopping, right? Some people who seem like they're in a hurry. Again, right? So it's 350 to 450 words. You can go beyond the word limit. You can. You're not going to get millions. You want to be at the minimum at least. Okay? And you don't want to get carried away. Now I know you're going to focus on narratives, right? But I'm going over description because it is part of the paper. Okay, reactions of observers, minimal or no narrative framework, right? Minimal, right? So there can be some, and what kind of some there can be, right? So when you are changing your focus, when you're changing direction, when you're changing senses or contrasting or talking about people, right? And so maybe in the market you're walking across the street. So this is narrative. For some action, it's like minimal or no. right? If there's none, that's good. Minimal works. Don't turn into, because what students tend to do is they choose description and they write a narrative out of it. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, the end. That's not description. Description is not what's actions are taking place as in the story moving forward. The story is not moving forward as such. Okay, there is no story in front. Another example of minimal is, right, you can say, right, after an hour in the evening, when people return from work, stop by shops, and then you go on with the description. So this is like maybe a line of narrative, right? So it goes with the minimum. Okay. Figurative language and techniques, so similes, metaphors, personification, sound devices, so alliterations, onomatopoeia, assonance. Right? So onomatopoeia is, the words that are used to describe sounds like clang and bang, and stuff like that. Alliteration is when you've got similar sounding syllables next to each other, or like as I said, similar sounding syllables. That itself is an alliteration. Okay? Moving on to narrative, which is of more of interest to you. Right? So what you want over here, right? Scenario established at the beginning. Right? So that's the theme. When I say a theme, right? Now for this, what I want to do first, right? I believe would be more beneficial is talking about the structure of a narrative, how you want to develop. It's like the classic structure of a narrative, story, how you want to develop your story. So please put that on screen. Can you see that picture? Classic story structure. Yes. Okay. So right, there are many others. Right? Just like scroll through, and there are like many other. You can see the hero's journey, three-act structure. These are for longer narratives, perhaps longer stories, maybe novellas or novels. Right? Um, they're not of concern to us. So what we're basically doing is with the simplest, as it says, the classic story structure. And so what we have, and just putting little images over there that might help us. And so what we have is exposition in the beginning, right? And so exposition basically means explaining, right? We're introducing, setting, so where this is happening, and, right? And lead into the problem. Problem doesn't mean it's an actual problem. The issue of the story, what the story is about. Okay. Then the rising action. So, for example, the story is about, um, there's a famous question in which a, right, a notebook plays an important role. So those are the kind of questions familiar with in this case. So, right, the setting is perhaps, you found it on the beach. Characters were problem is right notebook with name address, for example, that looks important. Rising action. So over here, right, what you're going to do, for example, right? So reach out, owner of notebook, and perhaps you go to address, find they have moved. Try and find out new address. Maybe they moved to a different city. Calling action, right? Long weekend perhaps, right? You take the bus, right? So very dedicated about this. And it's a story, right? It's fiction. It doesn't mean that you actually did it, right? You take the bus, deliver it in person, right? Resolution, finally, what, right? And one thing you want to do in resolution, right? The conclusion, don't write the moral of the story, do not, right? From this, we learned that we should be careful about our things, and it was the friendship, and it can be an opportunity to make this. But no, don't, right? I mean that's for like kid stories, maybe like fables or something. It's like regular novels and stories that we don't. If there is a lesson to be learned, it's mixed in the story. It's for the reader to understand, right? And if you can incorporate, if you want to, you don't have to. Keep that in mind, right? A story doesn't need to have a lesson. It could just be a plain and simple story. If you want to do that, incorporate it as part of your story, right? Not at the end. And from this we learn so and so and so and so. No, we don't learn anything. Okay? Acha. Also something that you want to avoid, I would say. So the kind of story you're writing, right? Avoid overused phrases, whether they're for starting or ending, right? And cliches, don't use the apostrophe sign. Cliches and overused plots. So, for example, do not write about haunted houses. Will not get much creativity. Do not write about a genie with a J or not, right? The genies coming out of your socks or wherever it is that you're finding. Okay. Do not write about surprise birthdays. Do not write about. Now I'm guessing you're thinking, oh my God, sir, what do we write about? That's what we do. I hope you don't. If that is what you do, then think of work on your creativity, waking up from a dream, right? Do not do any of this. These are all overused. Do not start with once upon a time, right? This is not so right. Okay. Right. For example, after 11 after. Although, I haven't seen many students do that, but this much of finding issues or whatever. Right? What you can do, for example, is again, right? So the classic story structure, and then if your skills are a bit more advanced and you can handle, if you can handle it, you can use flashbacks, uh, switch around the chronology. So maybe you're starting from the middle of the story. can use cliffhangers. If you use them properly, they will be appreciated because they are narrative and they are storytelling technique. So, right, these are some things you can use. Right, there's something called a red herring now, right, which is writing the story in which something seems obvious to the reader, but later on it turns out that it's not, and it's something else. Kind of like Sherlock Holmes, where the reader suspects one thing, but it turns out to be the other, like a mystery or suspense. So, these are some things to watch out for. The board. And to wrap up, I'm just going to go over right what the image is given. So the settings is a sufficient descriptive detail, but not too much. Now keep in mind, a descriptive topic should not have narrative, right? So minimal or no. But narratives can have descriptives, but not too much. Okay, in fact, any good story has some description. You're describing the setting. Maybe it's a town or a village or a market or a room or whatever wherever the story is taking place. And so you will give a bit of description. The atmosphere again, right, whether it's joyful, whether it is mystery, senses again, right? So again, but again, that the focus is not on the senses of the story. The focus is on getting the story from point A to point B to point C to the end. Okay, so moving the story forward. Figurative language again, characterization of protagonist, right? So the reaction, how they react to events, how they, you can use direct speech, you can use dialogues, uh, expressing their feelings, showing rather than telling again, right? So you use the expression and the feeling. It's not as if you're telling the reader itself, okay, instead of saying that he was happy, you could say that perhaps, uh, you know, he was grinning from cheek to cheek, right? And that obviously that he was happy. Control of time frame, right? So again, jumping in sequence, flashback, something already mentioned, movement of so we need to move the story forward, right? Not necessarily in terms of time, but in terms of events. Okay? Build up of tension if appropriate, if your story needs that kind of tension, right? So suspense, maybe, right? What's going to happen, and an effective climax, right? Or at least a definite, clearly signaled ending or intentional cliffhanger. So there it goes, right? So either have a very clear ending, that okay, fine, the story is now over, or right, have very effective climax, right? So something like really artsy in terms of literature, or if it's a cliffhanger, then again, if you've done it well, then cliffhangers will also be appreciated, right? And how the responses all link together to make a convincing story. And again, right, so if time is a factor in your story, so using words to talk about how the passage of time, uh, you can even use linking devices, right? If appropriate, right? The next morning, I went there, however, something happened, right? So some of the linking devices can be used. And yeah, I guess that's all for narrative. Oh yeah, by the way, whether narrative or descriptive, right? So if you're practicing, I do mention, I do hope I mentioned this in one of my earlier classes, Lana, right? So even your exam, right? When you're practicing now, plan in more detail, right? Plan everything that they mentioned plus the vocabulary and everything that was mentioned, everything that's going to be planned that out. So if you make notes or you make a flow chart or you make a spider diagram, it depends. No, it doesn't matter. No one's checking. No one's checking how you're doing. It's for you. It's for you to organize your thoughts. It's for you to organize your right ideas. So plan even the exam. Give yourself 5 minutes. Make quick notes of what it is you actually want to write. Maybe some special words that you like vocabulary, right? Adjectives, adverbs, whatever. Right? Give yourself time, and 100% a student who has planned before writing will do a better job. Okay, so that was about content. What are we going to check for language? Well, we know that we've talked about it. Using wide range of well-structured sentences, so the structure should be appropriate, the structure should be varied, and it should include complex sentences as well. And effective use of effective is important. So if you're using like a word, right, ominous, for example, right, but you're not using it correctly, and so that's not effective use. It's a good word, but it's not effective, and so it doesn't count. So using good words, using them correctly, a wide range of vocabulary. So it doesn't all have to be, out of a dictionary that, okay, well, what's this? Maybe it's in dictionary, I haven't heard of this, or it's not something in common use. Just good words in terms of standard. Like I shared that Oxford 3,000, 5,000 word list way back in the beginning of our classes. And so maybe refer back to that. Highly accurate use of complex spelling. So spelling, right? So using good vocabulary, the spelling is supposed to be accurate. Punctuation and grammar. Right, so punctuation includes your punctuation marks, capitalization, stuff like that. Grammar, so your tenses, right? All of that. And so that's the highest grade, and obviously the marking scale you can do as you go down. You don't want to go down, but still. Okay. And that is the end of right. That is the end of our sessions. That is the end of it's just the end, right? So as Cambridge mentioned, right, a definite, clearly signaled ending. That's what we have. Right? Any questions? We have a few minutes. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll address them.